Ave Maris Stella.
Hello and welcome back to Vatican II in a Year. This is your host, Father Matthew Schneider. I am a priest of the Church of Christ and a theology professor. This is a podcast on the StarQuest Production Network at sqpn.com. Today we're on day 243. We're covering Ad Gentes 2-3 on the Church's missionary by nature. If you want to follow along, we have a reading plan and more details at sqpn.com/Vatican or frmatthewlc.com/Vatican. So yesterday, we spoke about how the Church is divinely inspired to be for all, and we need a renewed missionary zeal. Today, we're going to start chapter 1 of this document, which is on principles of doctrine. And the summary of today is that the Church is intrinsically missionary, as Jesus went out on a mission from the Trinity in the hope to save all people. Paragraph 2 is more about the idea of the Church being missionary. Paragraph 3, more about the idea of Jesus' missionary nature. So, paragraph 2 has 2 subparagraphs. A is short but important. The Church is missionary by nature. And B, the missionary spirit flows from God's charity to help all peoples. Let's read it. 2a. The Pilgrim Church is missionary by her very nature, since it is from the mission of the Son and the mission of the Holy Spirit that she draws her origin in accordance to the decree of God the Father. As I said, it's short. That's a short paragraph. And this is the principle of the whole document. This is the foundational principle of this whole document. That's why we need to stop here. We often think of the Church just stable, our parish nice and things like that, our neighboring parish things and things like that. But no, it is the Church that's going to reach out. It's the Church that should reach out. And it's not just the Church in general. It's each member, each parish, each individual. So we ourselves and we are a parish have to think, how are we going to be missionary? How are we missionaries in our parish, in our own lives? So moving on to 2b, the missionary spirit flows from God's charity to help all people. Let's read it. B, this decree, however, flows from the fount-like love of charity of God the Father, who being the principle without principle, from whom the Son is begotten and the Holy Spirit proceeds through the Son, freely creating us on account of his surpassing and merciful kindness, and graciously calling us, moreover, to share with him his life and his cry, and has generously poured out, and does not cease to pour out still, his divine goodness. Thus he who created all things may at last be all in all. 1 Corinthians 15. Bringing about at one and the same time his own glory and our own happiness. But it pleased God to call men to share his life, not just singly, apart from any mutual bond, but rather to mold them into a people in which his sons, once scattered abroad, might be gathered together. Confer John 11. So we see in this document the self-referential nature of this decree. So it's referring to Ad Gentes by this decree there. And it's saying, hey, it comes from God's font of charity. This is where we are. God in the Trinity has this font of charity. The Father and the Son are the love, the beloved, and then the lover, and the love itself is the Holy Spirit. It's one of the analogies of the Trinity. Obviously, that's imperfect, but he is calling us to share in that love. He is calling us to be brought up into that love. So when we missionary, we bring people towards that love. We bring people towards the glory we have in the resurrection, where we are living more fully in that. And he wants us to mold us to be like him. One of the concepts that can be helpful here is in the Eastern Church, the idea that we often talk about as sanctification, making ourselves holy, right? Prayer and virtue and things like that, is talked about as divinization, making oneself like God. Now, obviously, we cannot become gods. That is not possible. God is God and we are not God. But the idea here is that we make ourselves like God. And this is really this idea of living more fully the charity like God has and things like that can be very helpful. So moving on to paragraph 3, it again has 3 subparagraphs, A, B, and C. The summary of A is that God's plan works out in each soul. B is that Jesus came as the mediator, like us in all things but sin. And C is about the apostle and the church fulfilling Jesus' missionary drive. So let's read them. Let's start with 3a. The universal design of God for the salvation of the human race is carried out, not only, as it were, secretly in the soul of man, or by attempts, even religious ones, by which in diverse ways it seeks after God, and perchance it may come in contact with him or find him, though he be not far away from anyone. Confer Acts 17. For these attempts need to be enlightened and healed, even though through the kindly works of divine providence, they may sometimes serve as leading strings towards God, or as preparation for the gospel. Now God, in order to establish peace or communion of sinful human beings with himself, as well as to fashion them into a fraternal community, did ordain to intervene in human history in a way both new and finally sending his Son, clothed in our flesh, in order that through him he might snatch men from the power of darkness and Satan, confer Colossians 1 and Acts 10, and reconcile the world to himself in him, confer 2 Corinthians 5. Him then, by whom he made the world, he appointed heir of all things, that in him he might restore all, confer Ephesians 1. So, this number really starts with a kind of idea which we have in Christianity that in other religions, they might have what's sometimes called the semi-verbi or the seeds of the word, where there are certain things pointing towards a higher power, pointing towards things like divinity, right? So we have here this universal design, all these things, and these are pointing towards the divinity of Jesus, the divinity of God. And so even in these pagan religions they don't have the fullness about God, they might have something that helps us to see towards God. And that's important. And that really brings us to the main point of this, where God reaches out in each soul and he works through the little moments, but he often relies on people like us to mediate this. So the person he's not just doing it by miracles. He often does it by human means. He often wants us to call them. He wants us to speak with them. He wants us to bring them to Jesus. And that's important. We're called to do that. There's that old saying that sometimes was kind of hokey and so how some people did it, but I think it's still valuable in its principle, the idea of we are the hands and feet of Jesus. He has no hands and no feet except for us. And that's important because Jesus, although he is God, he relies on all of us to achieve his ends here. And then it's fully shown in Jesus, he's the heir of all. He is the final consolation there. And that's really what we do. We bring everybody to Jesus. We find the fullness of revelation in him. So moving on to paragraph 3b, it's a little longer. Jesus came as a mediator like us in all things but sin. This is basic Christology. Basic Christology is the study of Christ. The basic idea here is who is Jesus and how he comes as a missionary to our world. And because our model as a missionary is Jesus coming into the world. So let's read it. B. For Jesus Christ was sent to the world as a real mediator between God and men. Since he is God, all divine fullness dwells bodily in him, Galatians 2. According to his human nature, on the other hand, he is the new Adam, made head of a renewed community and full of grace and truth, John 1. Therefore, the Son of God walked by the ways of truth and incarnation, that he might make men sharers in the nature of God. Made poor for our sakes, though he had been rich, in order that by his poverty he might enrich us, 2 Corinthians 8. The Son of Man came not that he might be served, but that he might be a servant, and give his life as a ransom for the many, that is, for all. Confirm Mark 10. The fathers of the church proclaim without hesitation that what has not been taken up by Christ has not been made whole. Now what he took up was our entire human nature, such as it was found among us poor wretches, save only sin. Confer Hebrews 4 and 9. For Christ said concerning himself, he whom the Father sanctified and sent to the world, confer John 10, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me. To bring good news to the poor, he sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim the captives' release, and sight to the blind. Luke 4. And again, the Son of Man came to seek and to save what was lost. Luke 19. So this passage gives us a number of references back to the Bible, references in the Bible about Jesus coming to save us. Jesus emptying himself to become like a slave, emptying himself to serve and not to be served, emptying himself to be poor even though he's rich. And this is what we have. We have a God who became man, a God who took things out of himself to become better. And so Jesus came as the mediator, and he is this mediator. He is the one who is both God and man. He is the one between us and God. And this is really important. But he is coming here as this mediator on a missionary journey in a way, because he's sent by the Father, just like he sends us. And he is bringing this good news. What are we supposed to bring in our missionary journey? The good news. And so we need to seek out the lost like he sought out the lost. We have stories like the Good Shepherd. Well, who's the Good Shepherd seeking? The Good Shepherd is seeking out the lost. We as missionary Catholics need to do the same. And this is important because this missionary nature is a nature of the church, because the church is the spouse of Jesus, and so is doing what Jesus wants, is working with Jesus. And we as individual Christians need to be missionary like Jesus was. We need to reach out to others. We need to go forward. We need to bring the world to Jesus and Jesus to the world. That's important. So let's move on to our last subparagraph today, 3c. the apostles fulfilled Jesus' missionary drive. But what the Lord preached at one time, or what was wrought in him for saving the human race, must be spread abroad and published to the ends of the earth. Acts 1. And beginning from Jerusalem, confer Luke 24, so that he accomplished at that time for the salvation of all, may in course of time come to achieve its effect in all. So what we see here in this subparagraph, this idea of sending out. At the end of the Gospel, at the beginning of the book of Acts, we see Jesus sending them out. We see the ascension, we see Pentecost, where they receive Jesus, they receive the Holy Spirit, but then they are sent forth to go and proclaim the gospel to everyone, to all Jerusalem, to Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. We are going to the ends of the earth here. That's what we need to do. And the early church followed them. We reached all over the place. They reached from India to Spain pretty quickly. Like, that's a pretty wide swath of the world. And one of the things that people think, Jay, is people forget about this today. And they forget about this and they think, oh, whatever. No, but this is still part of the nature of the church today. And this is still something that all of us have to do, and that all of us need to be missionaries. All of us need to share Jesus' love and share Jesus' gospel. So thank you for listening to this episode of Vatican II in a Year. This is a listener-supported podcast, and you can donate to help StarQuest produce another great podcast at sqpn.com/give. You can give one-time monthly to the StarQuest Patreon. Tomorrow, we're going to continue with the next paragraphs in Ad Gentes, which is paragraph 4 on the Trinity at work in the church. Please join us then to learn more about Vatican II, which can provide a blueprint for the Catholic Church. If you want more information on the podcast, like playlists for individual documents and a reading plan, go to sqpn.com/discord, sqpn.com/Vatican, frmatthewc.com/Vatican, or Vatican SQPN on Facebook and X. And like I accidentally slipped up there's also an SQPN Discord server at sqpn.com/Discord. And on there is a channel for Vatican II in a Year.
Amen.